Hi everyone, thanks for sticking around. My name's Claire Gardner. I'm a research manager at Flinders University in South Australia and part of the VegKIT team, which is a Hort innovation funded project. And today I've got a lovely panel of representatives of different sectors that we're working with, and we're sort of posing the question, can kids learning to love veggies drive future demand? The structure of this session is we're going to have a quick presentation by David Cox, who's a project lead and principal scientist at CSIRO, about the VegKIT project, so those that aren't familiar with it have a little bit of an idea what we're about and what we're trying to achieve. And then we'll go, similar to the last session, a panel discussion, and we'll ask some specific questions from the panellists and then open the floor for an open Q&A. So I'll hand over to David.
Thanks, Claire.
Sorry, the one thing I was supposed to remember was if you can, we have a pre-session poll on the app, or if you can flick through, whoever's in control of the slides, to the next slide, there's a QR code. So we've got 3 questions that we'd love you to answer, and we're going to ask you the same at the end. So the questions, if you just go into the program and our session, and there'll be a pre-discussion poll, and have a quick answer of that would be fabulous.
Okay, so I'm going to give a quick presentation. Whoever's controlling the slides, could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so VegKIT is a Hort innovation-funded project. It is around tools and interventions to increase children's vegetable intake. Next slide, please. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem is that for a while now, very few children eat recommended intakes of vegetables, and concurrent national nutrition surveys are suggesting that that's basically flatlining. That's a real problem. Only 6% of children eat the recommended intakes of vegetables, and that low intake generally carries right through to adulthood. So the demand for your produce is basically flatlined. We need to do something about it. So what's the opportunity here? Next slide, please. So VegKIT is the opportunity. It's an integrated program of 6 activities to increase children's vegetable intake. We're planning in the long term to increase intake by half a serve, and that has the potential to increase demand if every child in the country, aged between 2 and 6, increases by half a serve to increase demand by 19,000 tonnes annually. Next slide, please. So, as I said, it's 6 activities. The first activity was to determine best practice. The second activity was to create a registry of initiatives to find out what's going on. The third activity is a stakeholder alliance. The fourth activity was to look at current advice and opportunities to strengthen that advice in early years feeding. And then we have 2 sets of interventions, one focused on childcare and one focused on schools. The schools one also has some product innovation involved with it. So I'll just talk about these 6 quite quickly, but next slide. So all of this is on the website, so you don't have to listen to me at all because it's all there. Since October, we rejigged the website to be a kind of a settings-based website. So depending on who you are, you can just click on the bit that is relevant to you. Since October, we've had 50,000 page views, 7,000 users, and 4,000 resources have been downloaded. Next slide. So, as I said, there are 6 activities. This is the first one, best practice guidelines. This was a 3-phase process that looked at the scientific evidence. It then translated those into 7, you can see them up here, 7 principles behind best practice, and we're now disseminating that to a range of different stakeholders. This example here is around product development, but also we have best practice guidelines, for example, in childcare or in schools, etc., etc. Next slide, please. We also have an online registry, so we've invited people to put their initiatives on, and we're reviewing those through an expert panel. So the idea here is to enhance the efficacy of interventions through knowledge sharing and better practice. What we're doing here, and this quote from Newton, is really building on what we know and improving on that. Next slide. So supporting all of this, we have a Vegetable Intake Strategic Alliance, which is the VISA. This is really about disseminating knowledge, sharing it. We know that we can't achieve this unless we have a whole range of stakeholders, and I've listed the stakeholders here. So we have 20 to 25 people. We meet quarterly. We share information. And in turn, those stakeholders promote the outputs from VegKIT. Next slide, please. So activity 4, which was led by Flinders and Claire's team, is around looking at what current practice is, what current guidelines are, and we have determined that they are somewhat vague, not very actionable, not very vegetable specific. So we're strengthening all of that, and in turn, we have also looked at the scientific evidence as to what works. So what we know is that repeated exposure to a variety of vegetables can teach children to learn to like. So all of that is being built in and disseminated currently. And you yourselves can help to disseminate that. Next slide, please. So we have a couple of sets of interventions. So activity 5 is working in long daycare. This has 4 or 5 components to it. So direct supply to those childcare. We found that it's a bit ad hoc, it's expensive. You know, childcare centres are going to the local store, whereas we're now working with industry, Tony and Mark's, to direct deliver. We're looking at menu support and training, so we're working with the Victorian Healthy Eating Initiative. We're enhancing that, making it more vegetable specific. We're providing teaching resources in the form of curriculum work for kids, an adaptation of Taste and Learn, which was another Hort Innovation project that Astrid was involved with, which is a curriculum-based initiative in schools. And then we've got mealtime training for the staff as well to help them encourage children to consume vegetables. Next slide, please. So activity 6, led by Astrid's team, is about new products. So again, that was about developing from the science, building on what was done, creating new products, and one of those I think is being taken forward. Astrid can talk about that more. And testing those prototypes. We had a huge response to webinars on this, and some of those products are being taken forward. Activity, next slide, please. Activity 6.2 is an intervention in schools. So that started with menu analysis in New South Wales. We discovered that there isn't that much in terms of offerings of vegetables, so we've looked for opportunities in that. and that initiative is currently underway. So the baseline data is being collected right now, and it will be completed by the end of the year. So that's a very quick overview. Next slide, please. If you want to talk more about the details of it, other than what will be discussed now, we will be at the CSIRO booth afterwards. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll hand over to the panel.
Thanks, me.
All right.
Hiding behind you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks for that overview of VegKIT. Hopefully you got a little bit of an understanding about the range of sectors we're working with and working, you know, I guess in the places children are spending their time and have the opportunity to be exposed to vegetables, as well as at the top level with our work around trying to get guidelines and the advice that's going out to parents and even health professionals to be consistent across the board. So now I'd like to introduce you to our panel members, which hopefully represent some of the different sectors and the different people that we're working with. I'll go from closest to me. I've got Dr. Astrid Poelman, so she's one of the project leads, but her expertise is sensory science. She's a sensory scientist, oh that's a lot of S's in one, with the CSIRO, and she's done a lot of work explicitly working around how to get kids to love and like vegetables. We then have Shadia Djakovic, who is from the Healthy Kids Association, working on the New South Wales canteen strategy. So she's working directly with schools and through the school canteen. And then in the middle there we have Tara Leong. Tara is a nutrition educator, podcaster, author, all things nutrition. She's renowned for a no-nonsense approach to nutrition. So she's out there in the social media platform and a strong advocate for getting clear, simple nutrition messages out there. John Simonetta, I'm sure you all know, is Perfection Fresh Chief Commercial Officer. Yes. So John is working with the VegKIT team and obviously will bring in that sort of industry discussion point for the panel today. And then Belinda Adams, who is a grower as well as representative on AusVeg and GrowCom. Is it GrowCom? Yeah, local Queensland grower. So we've got a range of people that we're working with and hopefully that will give us some good discussion today. So I'm going to kick off with some questions and then I will open the floor to any questions from our members. And I'm going to open this up to anyone that would like to respond, because I guess the critical question or the critical issue that VegKIT is trying to address is children's low vegetable consumption. So panel members, can kids learning to love veggies drive future demand?
I've got the mic, so I might start for you. I truly believe in this project. I was on the consumer alignment team that actually put the first steps of this project together with a group of growers, and when we saw the data coming through in terms of the increase in consumption, one, for an industry driving activity where vegetables don't have a marketing levy that we can access to actually encourage change and increase consumption, this was an absolute no-brainer in terms of 19,000 tonnes and then the value back to business. But I think probably the other important thing and key important thing was around social change and the fact that David's mentioned so many points there around the low vegetable consumption. So I definitely think that this is going to be a real game changer, and it's essential not only socially but also for the industry as well.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. In terms of the future of consumption, we need to create as many opportunities for our consumers to utilise the products in different ways, different times. If we're able to have children consuming more of these vegetable products at a young age, well, it's only going to grow our base and our penetration for the future as well.
Absolutely.
I think the science is really clear that children aren't eating enough vegetables, and that the children who don't eat vegetables, unfortunately, they grow into adults who don't eat vegetables. So childhood is really the moment that we can capture them and try and introduce vegetables to them, because if the kids are eating them, the parents will buy them. You know, I don't buy beans for my daughter because she doesn't like them, but that all has to change. That has to change through changing the way we think about teaching children about vegetables, and it all comes down to getting them to love vegetables. And that has to change from where we were at in 1999 and forcing them to finish those 3 beans on their plate and getting them to explore and talk about the taste and the texture and the enjoyment of vegetables, and the repeat exposure. So having parents understand that just because their child on Sunday night didn't like green beans, it doesn't mean that they won't ever like them again. That just serving them up for the next few weeks is a really, really great moving forward. And I think that's what the VegKIT program has really been very useful with, is looking at that science and looking at all the different settings and all of the different ways that we can teach children about vegetables other than just telling them to just hurry up and eat your vegetables. Because I know if I went for dinner with my husband and he sat there and he told me and he said, we're not looking at the dessert menu until you finish that piece of corn, Tara, I'd get up and in a big huff and I wouldn't enjoy that corn and I'd be pretty cranky with him. But it's funny because with children, we stand over them and tell them to finish and that they have to eat their vegetables, but it's not working. And the VegKIT program is looking at different ways to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well summarised, Tara. I think we talk about it, within the team, this paradigm shift away from the health messages of eating veggies because they're healthy for you to actually let's teach kids how to learn to enjoy and love vegetables, and that is the focus of VegKIT, to move away from, eat it because it's good for you or eat it because we've told you you should be eating it. Shadia, yeah.
No problem. So, yeah, pretty much what's been said here. So I do believe that kids can learn to eat veggies, and through the school setting, I think it's quite important. They go to school every day and they need to see what's on offer in the school canteen, or the tuck shop as they call it in Queensland. And it's creating what's a norm. So if there are vegetable snacks and there are meals packed with vegetables, that's creating a norm. And school canteen managers need to show, need to make them more interesting. They need to make them fun, give them fun names, make them taste good, so that they have the capacity to compete with those salty, sugary snacks. So definitely yes.
Great. Astrid, I'm going to ask you a specific question because I think there's agreement that yes, kids can learn to love vegetables. But Astrid, your background in the sensory science area. Can you tell us the science behind learning to like vegetables? I think Tara's touched on it, but I'd love to hear your point of view on that too.
Yeah, so we're born with a few innate likes and dislikes. So sweet taste liking is one of them, and an innate dislike for bitter taste is also one of them, which doesn't set up vegetables as a category very well, because most of them are not very sweet and some of them are bitter. So it means that a liking for vegetables needs to be learned. And there's nothing wrong with that, because most of our food preferences are learned. We start as babies with milk. We have to learn to like a whole varied diet that depends on, where you're born in the world, what foods are available to us. So we can learn to like lots of different things. And a lot of that learning happens in childhood. Now, how does that happen? We've heard from various speakers already the repeated exposure. So just having been exposed, being offered, eating small amounts of vegetables, it doesn't have to be the whole plate, but just a small portion of it is already important to build the familiarity, and the familiarity brings the acceptance. So also variety in itself, being exposed to a variety of vegetables, irregardless of the consumption frequency and the amount, breeds acceptance of vegetables. Then we also know that, for example, role models can play a very important role. So parents are important role models, there's peers, there's also teachers, but it can also be celebrities or people that children look up to that can play a very important role in creating a love of vegetables. If we then look more at kind of the food and the product perspectives, we can see that eating vegetables in combination with other kind of foods and meals and dishes that children like can help facilitate that transfer. So it actually also helps breed an acceptance for the vegetables itself outside of that meal context. just by bringing the familiarity. And then on a product level, we see that fun, for example, is very important for kids, so bright colors, fun shapes. Also, characters on packaging has been shown to increase acceptance for vegetables. And then if we look at claims, like claims that talk about good taste, so we call that sensory claims, have been shown to increase acceptance. And at the same time, we know that health claims like eat veggies because they are good for you is counterproductive.
Yeah, great. Tara, I saw you nodding your head then when Astrid was talking about peer modelling and ways to, other opportunities or other ways to engage kids in veggies. Can I ask, maybe you talk to that point with your experience?
Yeah, so I have a social media platform, and quite often I have my daughter who is 6, and since she was 2, I've really been doing live videos online of her and I cooking. And you wouldn't believe, the really interesting thing is that every time we do a little show cooking, I will probably have 20 messages from parents who write in and say, little Johnny just made me put zucchini on the shopping list because your daughter was chopping them up. And that's every time I do a video. So I think it's really important that we're starting to look at the types of people who are teaching children about vegetables. And it does show that peer-to-peer learning is really effective in different environments. I think that we really do have to shift away from just getting parents to stand over the top of children and force them to eat carrots because, you know, they contain vitamin E. It's a very old-fashioned way of thinking, and we need to keep up with the latest research.
Yeah. I'm going to get you to pass the microphone over to John. The session prior to this was about marketing. And John, I guess with your role and your experience with Perfection Fresh, if we put the hat on about marketing to kids or marketing to parents and the occasions or the product opportunities, I guess what can marketing do to foster a love of veggies for kids?
Well, it can do a lot. I suppose I can best do this by an example. We have a product named Cukes, or a brand named Cukes, which is a baby cucumber. Hopefully you've all consumed it.
I'm pretty sure my son is keeping that brand alive solely.
So we invest quite a substantial amount of money in marketing our key products. One of those is Cukes, and that's across different platforms, obviously social and media and TVC. But recently we've joined with Soccer Australia, and we're sponsoring the Mini Roos, which includes the Matildas as an example. And what we found is that we are also doing some videos with the Matildas team, making cucumber snacks and salads and things like that. And the hits or the likes in terms of the socials have gone through the roof. And you know, it's an important part of it. We've got a real, you know, outside of being a grower and a few key attributes or key responsibilities as being a grower is, one is supplying safe food, obviously, that's paramount. But we need to make products accessible, and we need to do that by, you know, if it's marketing, certainly that's one of the steps.
I think one of the things I was discussing with you yesterday was the eating occasions and the opportunities. And from the data, we do know that most of the vegetable consumption is eaten in the evening meal. So there's not a lot of room or scope to add more veggies to that meal for kids. But there are eating occasions across the day that I think need to be taken. There's an opportunity there, I guess. And we talk about snacks a lot, and the Cukes sort of really fit that occasion profile. But I think there's other opportunities out there, there's other products out there. So I might just ask Belinda, as a grower, you know, what are the opportunities for growers to play in this? How do we get kids to eat more vegetables, or value add, or connect with partners, whether that's a retailer or a manufacturer? And how do we, you know, tie you guys into this picture?
I think, you know, so you're going to have individual products, obviously, but I think broad-ranging, using some of the strategies that have already been used in place around characterisation and colours and the presentation of the food and, you know, the snacking, the size of the products is just so keen and important. And I've seen them, you know, cut out as little dinosaurs and things like that. And what interests me the most is that young children really celebrate and enjoy that, and then somehow we just lose them on the journey along the way when they actually become, you know, sort of purchasers for themselves. So I think the integral piece of this work is about making sure that it is a lifelong transition, and this is just part of it, is to engage them with it at that time and let them celebrate and enjoy it. And I mean, the classic example is the grapes. I mean, they're phenomenal as a substitute to lollies, and what parent doesn't want their child eating tomatoes over lollies?
Yeah.
Just add into that. One of the tactics that we have as an example when we launch a broccolini, the tactic was to go to restaurants and food service and try and get the broccolini on the menu. A lot of people obviously order different products at restaurants, different flavours, and that then build the awareness for the product into retail. And then we utilise obviously our retail network or our retail partners to give us the showroom, so to speak, to allow consumers to buy our product. But in terms of for children, we really should be utilising that same type of tactic, but in care as childcare, etc. So there is an opportunity there definitely to build that awareness and consumption from that point, and then get the pull into retail.
Yeah, I think there is the opportunity for the direct supply to school canteens, to long daycare centre, to sporting organisations. I think it's, you know, thinking a bit differently how we connect the growers or the commodity groups to those key partners. I might pass on to Shadia, who is involved in the school canteen group. I guess the question, Shadia, is like, what benefits do you see that the VegKIT project has to your sector?
Yeah, well, the aim of VegKIT is to improve vegetable intake and drive future demand, and we at Healthy Kids have that same aim in mind. So with only, like David said, with only 6% of kids eating the recommended daily intake for vegetables, different approaches across different domains is required. So, I mean, the school canteen is a tricky place and there are a lot of challenges. So VegKIT is aiming to approach those challenges and make it easier to serve veg to kids there. We know that salty and sugary snacks may be to blame for the reduction in vegetable consumption. So we need to make sure that, like I said before, vegetables, meals and snacks are appealing. They've got, you know, appealing names, they're marketed appropriately, and they also taste good, so they keep going back for more. So, so I mean, canteens, there's a decline in volunteering, they're short on staff, they don't have much time or space, so we need to also make it easier for them to prepare vegetables. So I think VegKIT's really essential in making that happen.
Great. Okay, I think we've had a good time up here. So now I'm going to open the floor, the mic to the floor. So if anyone's got a question to ask of any of the members, I have one down here. Do we have another mic that we can...
Jeff Martin, Australian Mushrooms. We had a trial rollout last year to schools in southern Australia, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. We gave teachers mushroom kits so that kids could grow them, and the response was phenomenal. So I just wonder if you've got, you know, maybe we're missing something here, that you should show kids where the veg comes from and how it's grown.
Yeah, maybe I can answer that question. So similar for the Taste and Learn project that was spoken about earlier. So this is a school education program for specifically on vegetables, and it is dedicated to increasing enjoyment of vegetables. That's the primary goal. It was launched last year, so Taste and Learn website, you can access all the materials. It's available for teachers for free. It's a good success. We talk about different things, so growing of vegetables and showing vegetables is one thing, but we look at primarily all kinds of activities that relate to the curriculum that they can taste and explore the taste of vegetables. So verbalizing what they are sensing and understanding that how something tastes, that might be the same for everybody, like this tastes sweet, this tastes bitter, but what we like and what we don't like differs for each child. And that is also that they understand that that might change over time. And the opportunities are different depending on the stages of school where they're in. So for the youngest kids, for example, in biology, they need to learn about their senses. So there's activities where they explore their 5 senses through eating vegetables. In the later school years, they need to learn in the science curriculum, for example, what is a hypothesis, how do you conduct an experiment. So then they are preparing vegetables in different ways and learning about science in that way. So, but yeah, I agree, the classroom is a very important opportunity also to create that love, but also to be providing children with opportunities that might not have that from their parental background. And in that regard, it can help create more equity as well in Australia.
Yeah, well, initially we found that a lot of the kids said they hated mushrooms, they didn't like the taste, they didn't like the texture. But after they'd grown these in the classroom, with the supporting material which was given to the teachers, you know, like, I'm not sure what it amounted to, but a considerable number afterwards actually enjoyed mushrooms and were actually taking mushrooms home to their parents and giving them to cook.
Yeah, and that positive enjoyment, so you create a very positive environment in which children are exposed to the foods, and doing that together and seeing that evolving is an entirely different approach. And it does, that is kind of what we aim to do with the VegKIT project, the whole philosophy. It is building those positive moments, and that is very powerful for creating enjoyment.
It just seems to me that as a society, we've just lost track of where our food actually comes from, and especially with children.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that. So I know in New South Wales there's an increase in school gardens where the students at primary school level are starting to learn where food comes from, how to grow it, how to prepare it. And in early childcare centres too, my son's childcare has a little garden where they pick the herbs and they put it in the meal that they're going to eat for lunch. And I think that we need to put more of an emphasis on that. So there's definitely a need, and if you were to provide mushroom kits to schools in New South Wales, I can tell you right now they will go nuts for them. That is such a great idea, and you've done a great job there.
Any other questions from the floor for the panel? I have one up the back. Yeah, that was you. Yep.
I'll just speak as...
just talk loudly.
I was just curious, as a child who was sort of forced to eat one's vegetables, I, although observed that it was from a heart of they are good for you, I also feel strongly that it was also from a place of we won't waste food. So my question is, how do we convince people, those that are buying for canteens or even parents, to buy vegetables that children have once refused and have been thrown away? For people that don't have access to, backyard chooks or compost bin or, things like this in schools and also in homes, how can we encourage them forward? Yes, they're cutting things out into beautiful hearts or dinosaurs or whatever it might be, and they're getting that engagement, and isn't it wonderful? But what then do we do, to say to people, yes, this is wonderful, but also we have a plan in place for the waste, for what's left over. So I'd just be curious, from a personal point of view as well, to hear what you think.
I will just say a bit, and then I won't hog the microphone, I promise. So there is an increased concern for schools, particularly in New South Wales, about food waste, and we've seen plastic-free schools happening around certain areas. But composting is actually a big deal in school canteens, particularly with the bakwashi, it doesn't smell. You can have it inside the kitchen. So we're always providing opportunities for school canteens to reuse food that might possibly go to waste. So how could you use this wilted lettuce and so forth? So that's what we're doing in our sector Does anyone want to?
Yeah, Tara, can I get you to answer that from a home perspective?
Yeah, I think that there's two things there. So a lot of parents or school canteens are worried about that money being spent on something that may go in the bin. But it's about, again, shifting that focus to having people understand that if you serve green beans for 7 nights on your child's plate and they don't eat them, it's still an investment, because after week 3 they probably will try them. And so just shifting that focus, I feel, at the individual level can really help, because they've spent the money on the vegetable, feed it to the dog. Go online. There's so many resources now on how to use produce that would normally go in the bin. I made a cake the other day out of the week's worth of my daughter's soggy grapes that she didn't eat at school and kept bringing home. I kept serving them to her because I knew that soon she would start eating them, and I made a cake out of them. So it's about shifting that perception. And it's also about having people learn some cooking skills as well, and to get a little bit adventurous in the kitchen. But most of all, that perception around, even though they may be throwing it in the bin and wasting a little bit of money and possible environmental impacts of food waste, it's still an investment that is going to pay off if they stick with it.
I think the other point there is as well, we're not talking huge amounts in the home environment. We want vegetables offered, and if it's something that we're trialling in terms of getting them to learn to like them previously disliked, it's really small amounts. It might only be 1 bean cut up into 3 pieces. So the potential for waste can be mediated if we're not serving huge amounts either, because that has, for kids that have neophobia or just some pretty firm dislikes of food, serving a plate full of beans is obviously not going to go down very well.
Yeah, and when I work with parents, it's about shifting that focus, that you don't have to get your child to eat 17 green beans for dinner that night. If they hate green beans, don't put 17 on the plate. Put one on the plate chopped in 3 pieces, knowing that they're not going to eat it and that you eat it once dinner's finished. It doesn't get wasted. So being a bit more creative, I guess, about planning for food waste can then really limit and take that pressure off schools, canteens, individual parents at the home level, that it's all up to them to get their kids to eat vegetables.
Great. Now, I know lunch has started. Is there any more questions from the audience? Yes, Matt. Yeah. Yeah, good question. David, do you want to answer that as project lead?
So it's not that hard, I don't think, to get kids to eat fruit. They have innate preferences for sweet things, and so the bigger challenge has been vegetables, and I think separating out vegetables from fruit is kind of important, and making it more predominant. And I do think putting the two together has probably been a mistake. So yeah, the emphasis is really on this learning to like a food that's not necessarily innately liked. So that's where the focus on vegetables is.
And I think might be the first of our best practice guidelines is make vegetables the hero. So interventions or programs that profile vegetables, it might have been done with fruit or in a healthy eating context, but if it was about vegetables, had the greatest impact on increasing liking or intake or consumption. So we do need to, if we're focusing on vegetables, the rates are much lower for vegetable consumption than they are fruit. We need to profile and make vegetables the hero in programs, in marketing, in any initiatives that we're working with. Yeah. Okay, no more questions? No one's got a bursting question? I'd just like to wrap up and probably, I'm going to ask this question of David, that, what does VegKIT offer right now to industry, to health professionals, to the sectors we're working in with long day care and schools that can be accessed? We're building, we've got this website with tools and resources available.
Yeah, that's the answer. So the website is there, up and running, vegkit.com.au. Don't get confused with a similar American one. It is .com.au. All the resources are up there for different sectors, and I would encourage you all to look at those that appeal to you most, those that appeal to you as consumers yourself, as parents, but also as in your industry interests as well. So there is product information there, largely from Astrid's team, and best practice as well. So all the resources are there.
Thank you. Before you head off, it would be great if you can go back into that poll and do the post-poll questions. That would be excellent. And join me in thanking the panel members for participating today and coming from all over Australia pretty much. So thank you.